Kentucky Derby here later, and all the residents, they love to come in this room, and they'll literally be swarming at the door if we're not out here on time, because they want their party. But before, yeah, they do, really. They're very serious about the party. One lady tried to come to our class at like 2 o'clock. I'm coming for the tree party. I'm like, it's not time yet, ma'am, you know. I want to bring you up to date in case you haven't noticed any postings this week. A couple things that are pertinent to all us tree people are the fact that the Board of Tree Experts, the law and the rules were posted. So it's now official. So I am not a CT anymore. I am now an LTE officially, and all those people that are not going to come on board are going to be able to be gone after. So it's good that you're here, because you could be the first group. If you pass, you'll be right LTEs right away. So I have the press notice if anybody wants to read it. And another interesting thing for any business people in here is we got a determination from Regulated Business Assistant Deputy of Registration and Licensing. This just came like yesterday, because the board had petitioned them, because everybody is in business around here. How many of you pay that lovely license fee, the home improvement? Well, if you become licensed as an LTCO or LTE, you won't have to pay that. This will supersede that, and we have the determination in writing, so that'll be one fee you won't have to pay, because that's what some people said. I'm going to have to pay for this license, and then I'm going to have to pay for that, and I'm going to have to pay for that too. And that's something we didn't want, is to be overly encumbersome with this thing. And I know different towns that require, I have some towns that's not big fees, but they require registrations. All you'll have to do, since this is an actual license now, you provide proof that you are licensed by another state entity. You won't have to pay them either. So now you're up to date. You're the first to hear all this great news. So now you're ready to learn a bunch of stuff today, I hope. And our first speaker is going to be Dr. Neil Hendrickson from the Bartlett Research Labs. And come on.
All right. Well, I don't know if you've heard, but they have another licensing category called the GTE, and that's me, a geriatric tree expert. So, all right. So I changed these things around to make them more testable. So, what I'm going to try to do is do my best to keep you simply awake. I don't expect you to remember anything like this. But I had a question. Should I take notes? I'll kind of tell you what's important. I usually do just what the hell I feel like, because I'm getting old and don't care. But they tell me, and I've never seen the exam, so I have no idea what they take from what I say, what they put on there. But I'll tell you what I think is important. So anyway, of course it's all important. I wouldn't do this. But anyway, so this is, if you're going to be an arborist. Now, when I was at Rutgers, I had the worst soils professor in the history of academia. Also the frats had all the exams, so they all got A's without studying. They were all hung over and all this. And they would get A's, and those of us who actually tried to pay attention would get C's, because the guy gave the same exam every year. That's why I didn't like it. But I had a professor of forestry who was famous at Rutgers named Ben Stout, and what he said is the most important thing foresters, now arborists, should know is soil. And he was right. So I'm not a soils person, but I know this. What I've learned is because it's interesting and it's important if you're going to work with trees, especially in the world of changing environment, which of course I've been told by reliable authorities and government isn't a problem. Anyway, you have to realize that soil's a fragile system. Leonardo da Vinci, none other than Leonardo da Vinci, said we know more about the stars and the planets than we do about soil. You know, and it's pretty much true. You probably are, I don't know if you're thinking it or not, but certainly when I hear a soils talk, I'm all ears, because I don't know much about it. I don't think many of us do. But almost every place that we deal with in New Jersey is subdisturbed somehow. We rarely deal with trees in their natural setting. We deal with landscape trees, which means the soils have usually been touched like this or something like that at some time in the past. And the real point of this is you can't have a decent tree without decent soils. The number of times, now I've had the privilege of working for the laboratory at Bartlett for 17 years, but I was 13 years in selling tree work before that. And we always looked up and sprayed this and sprayed that, and the question was always, what do I spray? Hey, what if I told you it wasn't about what's above ground, it's what's below? Most of the problems that happen to your trees happen below ground. So With crummy soil, you're only going to get a crummy plant. So these are the basics. These are the things that if I were writing your exam, I'd probably put on it. Some kind of definition. What is soil? There's a million ways to describe it. It's the difference between it's where the rhizosphere and the atmosphere, all that stuff. But the idea is it's in between a rock and a hard place. It's in between the rock and the outside world. The rock core of the earth and the living things. It's where plants grow. You can say that. That's from the Department of Agriculture. Because it's where plants grow that we're interested in it. This is the other thing that we never think about. You know, clients, if you deal with clients on a regular basis with trees, they forget plants grow. So do we. But we often wind up saying, hey, this tree grew. Like I'm 66. Those trees that I saw when I was selling when I was 40 are now pretty big. So soil's the same thing. It changes with temperature, with rain, with all these other things. Soil changes. So, and what's the difference, you know? Dirt. No, it ain't dirt. Dirt's what you get onto your fingernails. Dirt is what you scrape off your shoes before you go home. So now I'm going to hit a few of the basic points. So after the definition. What does it look like basically under a microscope? So I'm going to work from the small to the big. It is the soil structure is how it's all arranged. That's one basic question. And all the parts of it. And this is what it looks like in an ideal situation, blown up a lot from an artist's rendering. The word I use a lot, and hopefully if you want to be good at this, you will use it. When people ask me what I do for a living and I'm feeling cranky, which is all the time, I tell them I manage macro pores because it's what arborists in the future are going to do. And a lot, when your company is big and has the opportunity to do a lot of soil management, it's what we do. We manage these spaces, macro pores. So this is what soil looks like. There's a lot of airspace, and I'll show that in a diagram too. But the idea is these aggregates, all these things that make a soil particle under a microscope. These are the most important parts, the macropores that are between these soil particles, sometimes called heads, and the macropores are the little spaces within. Blow that up even bigger, and all the things you hear about, all the things that people want to treat to make your soil better, go on here. Those little spaces, the microbial glue where people want to throw on compost tea or add earthworm castings, the fungal hyphae, the mycorrhizae you hear about are all down here, the bacteria which help break down things, and the actual soil particle. It's only a part of it. There's a lot going on there. It's a very, very biologically rich part of the world, and when we mess with it, we screw that up. To put that in a chart, this is, and again, this is on everybody's soil exam when you take elementary soil, so you might as well, you don't have to draw the chart. What you do know, and this is on the internet. You know, I take most of my pictures from the internet, so anything that I say, all you have to do is make a note if you want. But this is the ideal soil. It's pretty easy. 50% mineral and organic matter, 50% space. 25% of which is filled with water at any given time. That's the way they draw it up. And so I'll hit on this a little, these points a little bit. The idea that 50% pore space is ideal, you know, it's a gee whiz number, or just someone to remember, but to give you a sense of the soils we deal with when we walk over them, when we are dealing with them, when we drive a bucket truck over them to get to a tree, this can be changed. And when we change it, it's not necessarily good. This is something I'm going to hit on a fair amount. Mulch, organic matter. What's the magic number in nature? 5%. You know, more is good, but a lot is not necessarily a whole lot better. You know, sometimes you don't plant in stump grindings because there's so much organic matter that as it breaks down, your new plant sinks, right? So that's just one of the key basics of that 50-50, the mineral soil and organic matter being 50%, pore space the other. I threw this in because it's so obvious, whether they put it on the exam or not. Hopefully you know, like driving down here off the turnpike, I look and see, well, there's a lot of sand over there. It's really light. On the other hand, you go back up a little north in New Brunswick, and it gets a little richer because of the glacial history, among other things, and where the rivers are and the silt and all of that. But all you need to do is you start digging a hole or you see an excavation. If it's dark, you have an idea that it's pretty good because it's got a lot of organic matter, a lot of humus in it. So that the darker the soil, the more nutrients it contains. That's because of the organic matter. The darker color, yeah, decomposed organic matter is what's in there. So if it's gray, right away, if you see gray soil, what that means is it's been in a lot of water, probably standing water, and the nutrients have been leached out of it. And often as not, a real gray soil will smell like a sewer because it's been without oxygen. It's been anaerobic. And that's usually a tree killer when you see gray soil. Real red soil means a lot of iron. You don't usually see that. One of the key things, so that's just looking at the soil. The best thing you can do is go get dirty and get your hands dirty. Ain't no good arborist I know that ain't willing to get his or her hands good and dirty. I know I am a connoisseur of soap in a can. It's a spray soap because you get your hands dirty if you're a good arborist. You're always digging in the soil, smelling it. I wind up with dirt in my soil in my beard and all that. And because once you get into the soil, you want to know what it feels like in addition to how it looks, how it smells, what the fine roots are. So soil texture is the feel, is the particles of sand, silt, and clay, the relative proportion. So sand, silt, and clay. We don't, when they talk about this stuff, they leave out organic matter and they leave out gravel. Okay, that's the way it is. Is it important to what we do? Yeah, that stuff's important. But if you haven't ever seen this, you should at least know it exists, what it is. This is famous if you take soils in everybody, and I have never used it. I have never referred to it. It's just good to know it exists. And what this is it just tells you that down here, the sand are the big particles. This tells you the percentage. And the small soil particles are the clay, right? Sand is big like the beach. And clay is the stuff that you can roll a worm with, which I'll get to in a minute. And silt is, when you get these, that's the medium particles that are kind of a combination. The silt is usually what comes out when a river deposits sediment. And the sweet spot, whoops, yeah, I said that. The sweet spot is right down there. You've heard of it. It's a loamy soil. That's beautiful. It's dark. You pick it up, it crumbles in your hands, it holds water, but it drains well. This is the ideal soil, right about there, what we call loams. And what this does, it tells you, well, if you have a really nice soil, it's easily compacted. If you have a clay soil, it's easily compacted. If you have a sand, this should be intuitive. I shouldn't be telling you anything you really need to know. Sandy soils, you know, they're hard to compact. You drive a bulldozer over the beach, so what? You drive a bulldozer over these soils here, and what do you have here mostly, Joe?
It's a heavier clay, but pretty organic.
We have a lot of clays in New Jersey, and when we do, and when we have construction, I pull over the road, I cause accidents taking pictures of places where people have driven over clay soils, especially for those people that are working today and have to get a job done, and they're driving on these soils. I want to take pictures, I want to document it. So this is why loam is so nice. It's a mixture of all three. It's the best because it holds the right amount of water. It doesn't hold too much. It causes diseases like Phytophthora root rot or things like that, which is the most common disease arborists ever deal with, whether you know it or not. It also, because of its structure, its texture, it holds the most nutrients and releases them most effectively to trees. So in nature, it's the natural soil. It's why trees grow well best in nature, and if we do our jobs right as arborists, we create the soil that the trees grow best in. So this is this is all you need to do. Now, again, if I were going to give an exam, I'd say, how do you tell soil texture? Really, you get the soil wet and you try to roll a worm. If you were a kid, and if you were a kid and you didn't do this, I feel bad for it. But we were always making balls and worms and rolling stuff. The longer the worm you can roll and it stays intact, the more clay it has in it. If you pick up beach sand, right, it's coming out, and you can't even make a sand castle without adding enough other material to it, right? So sand will not do anything. And so if you just wet a sample, and if on a day like this, you don't even have to wet it, roll it into a ribbon. If it makes a ribbon, it's clay. The longer the ribbon, the more clay there is. If it doesn't, it's sand or silt. And if it's really gritty, it feels sand. It's sand. And if it feels more like flour, then it's silt. It's actually pretty simple, but it's critical on how trees grow. So if you wanted to, that's something you should at least have some feel for. Now, I can pick stuff up and to get no closer than feels pretty sandy. I feel it's this or that percent of sand. If it gets clay and I can't get it out of my fingerprints, then it's pretty high in clay. Things like that. I'll show you a couple of pictures, but that's kind of a nice loamy soil. That's probably pretty high in clay. You really just need to know that, because how you manage that soil, and the future of arboriculture is going to be more soil management. More is going to go on below ground. Certainly, and I say that, I'm trying not to make this an infomercial, but because I work for a laboratory, when I started in the business, it was, hey, we'll feed them. And now we have a variety of services. We don't call it fertilization, it's soil management. Because that's what everybody has learned in universities and in laboratories is most of the problems that happen above ground or below. I already said that. And if we can get the trees growing in ideal conditions, what we find out is trees can defend themselves pretty well in a world that likes fewer guns up in the air spraying pesticides. So, except for invasive species and things, soil management is a lot of our future. And so, what interferes with it? I already said this. Number one, this is, I once got this off of an arbor age, the silent killer. You don't have to go very far to start getting pictures like this. When I'm gone, they'll go to my photo archives and they'll see picture after picture after picture of ways that soils damage trees. And it's simple, because if you ever talk to people who don't work with trees, hey, I didn't cut no roots bigger than this. Hey, don't worry about it, because there's no roots that go out. It goes down like a carrot, don't it? So, yeah. So the point of it is, everywhere, every lawn service, and I'll get to this, everybody that goes near trees messes them up. It's not the word I would usually use, but it's polite. But every place where people interact with trees, soil damage happens. At my house, and Joe can tell you, the front of my house was old farm field or pasture, and the back of my house I have a full basement, fill. And so I can't grow anything. All I can do is try to till in organic matter. It is the worst place to grow anything. So I gave him my favorite tree. So anyway, soil compaction is everywhere. There you go. It's every place we go, we compact the soil. So this was the mayor of the town I used to live in. Said, "Oh, you're the tree guy. Will you come over to my house?" And I said, "What the hell are you doing? You're the mayor. You're supposed to know better than this." And so, first of all, he drove around and around until it was thoroughly compacted. Then, of course, cut all the roots so we could put it in a raised planter backfilled with gravel. Don't do this. Don't try this at home. And this is, they're professionals. Professional what? I mean, there's professional wrestlers too, but so I go by and I see the tree in its early stages of decline, probably 10 years later. It's an old picture. But the thing about things like this is it's going to be expensive when he takes the tree down and then has to dig all this out to grind the stuff and plant something. Never mind. But there's another neighbor. These are people within a mile of my house. They said, "Oh, great! We'll build this starter castle, this McMansion, and we'll take care of these pines." So first, they grade around them, take all the topsoil off, backfill them nicely. Then they put in planters and made sure this was nicely graded. And then they marked on the trees how far to backfill them. Same idea. This is not unique. So if you know landscapers, please do this if all you want to do is takedowns for a living. So then that was 2008. Then, oh my goodness. Geez, they don't look so good. What should we spray? And 2010, there's one. There's the other. So, you know, we kill them. Trees. The basking ridge oak. I was the first one to age it. I went there the day after. And since for my PhD thesis, I aged about 3,000 tree cookies, I'm sort of experienced with it. So I sat there crawling or aging the tree. And then when you look at it, you say, I see what killed this. What killed it is raking up the leaves. And there's a column of decay that was filled by cement in 1924. You walk over here, and the grave nearest, the two graves are 1860 and 1867. Decay works from the outside in and the bottom up. It went about 20 feet over to the tree, killed that root. There's a big depression where that root that used to take care of that tree died. Then if you take that's about 60 years till they put the column in. So the decay in a white oak moved that slowly to move up the tree. It took 60 years. They filled it with cement. And really cool, the other side of that tree has what we call in tree risk assessment response growth, massive roots on the opposite side to hold the tree up for what they lost over here. But you stand on the stump and you look around, you say, I get it, I get it. It was bad arboriculture because they cut the tree back. They cut live wood out when the tree was already a couple hundred years old and older. It was mostly the 20th century where we started butchering it up, and then they raked up all the leaves, and then they dug and killed roots. So it was pretty clear because you can see how the tree, started to slow down 90 years ago, a little more 70 years ago, and in the last 25 years, it pretty much slammed shut when we probably took much better care of the lawn around the cemetery. Anyway, the tree has a hollow center about that big, and so I had to extrapolate, but it's not 600 years. It was between 425 and 500, and not a day over 500. But anyway, yeah, this is what we do, and then after they're gone, they call the arborist and say, what's wrong with my tree? And we don't often see this, which is why you have to get down there. I took all the slides out for the sake of time, but there is a device called a Dutch auger. I would not be without it, and I shouldn't have taken all the slides out because I use that every day to look at soils, and when I have other people that I work with use them, they buy them. The price is about $110 if you buy them from Cation Camp in Charlotte. But I can see roots, I can see soils, I can tell textures, I can take soil samples. I might have a picture of it, but I doubt it. So what are the consequences? Why am I talking about it? Because in my backyard, which is compacted because it was graded fill, the erosion takes away my seed. I can't even get a tiller into it half the time. It's so compacted. It won't even grow weeds. And so it restricts plant growth, and it'll limit the soil's ability to absorb water. And the runoff takes off your topsoil. So, and of course, it breaks down the tree's biological activity. So it's mostly low oxygen because you crush out the macropores. And I'll show this again just in another slide, but I'll skip over that. But rainfall on bare soil, that's why turf is a good thing. Raking things up. I'll come back to mulch and how valuable it is, but beautiful lawns and trees don't coexist in nature. They just don't. People like them, but if they really love their lawn, whether they admit it or not, they don't really like trees. Because if you like trees, you'll have compost or mulch underneath. Working on wet soils, like today is not the day to work outside or even mow the lawn because that'll compact it. Repeated tillage. If you're just running and I'll hit this again, if you just keep tilling a soil, that's not going to do it any good. If you till in organic matter, that's another story. But here's another way to look at it, same information. This is, if you look at soil under a microscope, it looks like a sponge. It's mostly solid with macropores. And compaction crushes these macropores. So, you know, what happens is the air and water get pushed out. That's a nice soil compacted. You get an idea of how bad that can be. These are the, micropores increase. What does that do? The smaller pores, if you've ever heard of capillarity, all it means is the same reason that when they take a little, prick your finger for a blood test, it goes up those little, the diameter has everything to do with how tightly it's held. So if you have a small pore in the soil, these micropores, like in clay, they have surface tension. They're not going to let that stuff go. In soils they call it hygroscopic water, you're not getting it off of the soil particles. The plant won't get it. And that's why when you have these problems of compaction, you get drought symptoms, you get nutrient deficiency symptoms. Just another way of looking at it. Roots won't penetrate in compacted soil. And again, when you talk about construction and people say, I didn't have no roots bigger than this, it's not the roots we're worried about. It's the ones that are like angel hair postins, like beard hair and smaller. Those fine roots, some people call them feeder roots, those fine roots, when those are damaged, that's what'll do it. And I'll show you another picture. They only have the ability to push through a couple of 100 pounds of pressure. And then what happens is if you crush it down to micropores, you don't get good drainage, you don't get water through the soil, you reduce the air, then the microorganisms go south, there's less earthworm activity, all those things. So it's a bad thing. So this is the analogy. If you squeeze all the water, if you leave a wet sponge, right, on your countertop, it's about 50% air and about 50% water, and after a while it gets all kinds of nasty because of the microorganisms. That's why you squeeze it out. But in soil, those microorganisms are what we like. So, and let's see, this one should run by itself. It isn't. So, let's see if it will. I don't know why it won't run. Anyway, what this would show, if it were running, were that this won't penetrate compacted soil. Well, that's all right. I hope my other videos run. This is a $100 device. If you want to show off to clients. Clients are impressed by this. But I also find it useful. This is a compaction tester. It's got a gauge, as you see. It has for a 3/4 inch tip, an outer ring, and a small tip, a 1/2 inch tip, an inner ring. And what this says, if you see it green up to 200, this means that roots can penetrate soil up to about 200 psi of resistance. Right? They'll push with 200 pounds of pressure into the soil. If you compact the soil and it's hard to get the root through, it'll start to show that a root might go through the soil between 200 and 300 pounds of psi, and above 300 it won't. But on a day like this, it'll go easy. If it were in a drought, it wouldn't. So I don't use those absolute numbers. What I do, and this is usually really fascinating, so if you like the science of arboriculture, if you like knowing stuff, this is a great tool to learn stuff with, because typically what I do is I'll take what we call a transect. I'll go over from near the tree over there, I'll come over here, and I'll kind of do it all over the property. And I have often found roads, or construction roads that were sodded over, old parking lots. I was just at a really expensive property in Mendham, and all the trees were, oh God, it was $1 million+ in landscape just in the front yard. The trees are failing and just beyond their guarantees, so the homeowner's livid. It's probably happened to you. And what happened was, took this out, started finding it, 6 inches down, and I've seen this multiple times. 6 inches down, it had been graded. People drove over it, graded the site, put a little topsoil down and sodded it. Or didn't put topsoil down, just put sod on top. So it's like an AstroTurf ball field over a parking lot. And I see it all the time. And you can't tell that unless you probe it. You can do it with a long-bladed screwdriver. I tell people all the time, the most useful tool you're ever going to get is run down a Homer's, get you a $9.99 long-bladed screwdriver, and that's the expensive one. And you can check moisture, you can check compaction, just poke the soil, get used to looking down there. Someone said to me at an outdoor workshop when I was saying, this is how you check soil moisture, and the person said, nature's dipstick, huh? I said, I'm stealing that line, that's the best I've heard. But you've just got to find some way. What does it have to do? Biopsies. You know, what do they do? Put it down your throat. What do we have to do? We have to see under that turf. Turf is not our friends, but this is kind of like typical. That's actually supposed to be soil down there. That's not cement. But that's one of those kinds of places. So the other way to do it, and I don't recommend this is a bulk density sampler. This is a tool designed by Satan. And what it's doing, you take a core sample, then you cut it to a known volume, 3 inches in our case, of the thing, and then you dry it. It's that simple. But that slide hammer, to do that all day, if you've ever worked with soils and done that, you will wish you were doing something else. I remember the last day I did that all day. I mean, it's like one of those things, it's like the sinking of the Titanic. I don't want to go through it again. But this is what it means. And you might hear this term, so I'm going to share it with you. Bulk density. It's how much soil, how heavy is the soil per unit of volume. They do it in grams per cubic centimeter, but it's like pounds per cubic inch, that sort of thing. Pressure. So, it's a narrow range. So water is 1. Solid rock is about, I think brick is about 2 point something. And what does it say there? Solid rock is 2.65. So what you see is when I was in forestry school, they said, forest soils float. I said, come on. Now I knew what he meant. It's mostly humus, it's mostly organic. It's the good stuff. And solid rock's 2.65. So if you go from 0.7 to 2.65, you've got 2 units really to work with the whole range. Where trees love it is from almost no convectional to about 1.3. The sweet spot for trees, when you have that big circle of 50-50, that's about 1.33. So trees are happy, but you get to about 1.5 and trees aren't happy. It doesn't take much for soils to get compacted or compacted enough so that growth starts to slow down. So 1.5 in clayey soils. So if you think about it, if you care about an arboretum like this, I'm sure Joe has all these issues. You have time, you have to get things done when you can get them done. But you have rain like this and you run great risks of doing certain things. Don't you have these issues? Yeah, everybody does. So you want to get the job in. You've got only so much time. It's spring. It's what we call the 100 days of hell, April 1st to June 30th in the arboricultural business, right? So you've got to get these things done. And now you're going to face driving the truck across. It's not about sinking it up to the hubs. It's the damage you do that's irreversible. So this is just those same numbers. For 1.33, I said this isn't that magic number. But if you get to 1.50, which is when it starts to slow down, look at how small a change it is. My point, and I said it earlier, soil's fragile. You want to take care of it. This property is a famous pop star in New Jersey who is not Bruce Springsteen. And no, it's not Neil Sedaka or Frankie Valli. So they had 6 of these maples put in by a very famous landscape architect, and they immediately started to go south. However, they had another tree over by this aforementioned anonymous pop star's studio, which was performing beautifully, so we had a control. And we have treated trees and a control. You know, not a big experiment, but enough to say, hey, wait a minute. So we took this out. Okay, so if you've listened to what I've said or have any experience, see any macropores? See any roots? See any air spaces? It was a roadbed. That was where the construction vehicles went. They planted in it. So this is from the aforementioned satanic bulk density sampling. That does not look like real soil. Also, it has the weight of a bowling ball. If you pick up these soils and they feel that heavy, they should tell you something. It should be like, there's something wrong there. That's my Lewis Black impression. So there's no macropores. You don't see any fine roots. The roots can't grow in it. So right away, if you don't see roots near a tree, and it's been there a couple of years, you already know that the bulk density has to be above something like 300 pounds of PSI, because the roots won't get through it. No roots are going to penetrate this. So you have to loosen that, which is what we did. Yeah, and so consequently what happens is all kinds of terrible things start happening. Anaerobic bacteria take over, it starts to smell, and it hasn't turned gray yet because of water sitting in it, but they lost a lot of expensive trees. And just to show you, this is how we do it. We just did we sent it to our lab, and it says that particular soil was a clay soil, and it was 1.8 ounce, damn near gray, just about. So he more gray hairs than the last time I saw you, but that's both of us.
I don't think you.
And so here's the famous soil food web that everybody talks about you go out and you do all these right things. No, you compact the soil, forget it. Ain't none of that matter. And I will get on how to fix it. This is one way, this should work, but I bet you it won't. Does everybody know what how an air spade works and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, then I don't have to show it. But it has changed everything. The air spade was originally developed during World War II, and it produces a column of air that's a little over supersonic, but it keeps it tight for a few inches. And what it'll do is blow excess soil away without damaging fine roots. The military tried it for landmines. It was mostly developed in the 60s by Brooklyn Union Gas Company to excavate gas lines in the city so they wouldn't blow them up, because they had a bad history of that. So my boss, actually, former boss, Bruce Frederick, the director of our lab, was at a conference 25 years ago in California and saw them demonstrating it at a trade show. And he said, I bet you we could use that for trees. So we called the airspace company, and they started coming to the laboratory. He handed it over to another one of my colleagues, Dr. Smiley, said, see what you can do with this. He said, we can't do anything with this. 15 years later, the process of using the airspace in soils is its only patent. And it's because it's kind of a unique system. But what we show there is that airspace loosens the compaction, and then we till in organic matter. If you just loosen the soil, there's good data on this. If you just loosen the soil with an airspace, it will recompact. Because it's just pick it up, put it down. All the things, there's things been called teravents. They shoot nitrogen in. If you just till it, it'll recompact. You have to incorporate organic matter. I'll get back to that. So what can you do? I should have put this first. Spread compost, leaves, wood chips out of the back of the truck. Mulch is this, and what I do, and when I do other talks outside of arborists and landscapers and things, and I do these talks, I say, no matter what you ask me about what I talked about, the answer is mulch. So whatever question they put on the exam, just put mulch, you'll be all right.
No.
Well,
Sort of.
sort of. At least all the soils questions, I don't know, but mulch would be a good idea. So, if you're going to till in compost. All of those chips, all of that stuff that's somewhere in someone's backyard, all those leaves, find a way to till in compost. That's the answer to everything. And I'll get back to this. So that is all we can really do about compaction, is find a way to get organic matter in. I did a research project once way out in the Hamptons in Long Island. I know my job's tough. But we fertilized in sandy soils to see if, I didn't plan on that. But the idea was to see if we could over-fertilize mature trees, because people say if you over-fertilize them, you'll kill them. It didn't happen, that's not the case, that's another story. But what we found was the fertilizer wasn't in the tree and it wasn't in the soil. It went away, went into the water. Wow, that was one of those findings you go, hey, wait a minute. So what's the answer? Compost. Till in compost in sand, and suddenly you have real soil. Let it break down, you get the black gold. So mulch is the answer to just about everything. You get compacted clay soils, add mulch. If you can do nothing else, the microorganisms will gradually break down that mulch and you'll get your soil back. So to keep on schedule, I'll answer questions later, but let me switch to the other thing that we do. So those are the basics, that's soil. What do? Hey, we dig root feed. No, we don't. We don't feed anything. Trees feed themselves, we fertilize. And we don't deep root fertilize anymore. This is an old Bartlett picture. This is how we had to dress. This is Bob in the back will be speaking to you when he was a little younger. And this is the guy right out of, what was the one where Jessica Rabbit...
Dick Tracy?
Hmm?
Oh, no. I know what you're talking about. Who Framed Roger
Who
Rabbit?
Killed Roger Rabbit? Doesn't he look like Bo Hoskins or whatever? Yeah. Anyway, so let me talk about this. This is also important because it's a cash cow for a lot of people in arboriculture. But it's changing. A lot of places that are sensitive. Long Island has been trying to restrict fertilization. They refer to it as cosmetic. The Chesapeake Bay watershed is very sensitive to you have to have a license if you're even going to apply phosphorus, because the chicken farms and all the nutrient runoff has ruined a $2 billion a year fishery. Not ruined, but it's ruining it. And so consequently, we get painted with the same brush. So what we say, I once heard a really good talk by a guy from Cornell named, I forgot his name, and what he said was, when you see a drop spreader going down somebody's lawn and you see all those particles landing on the sidewalk, you put fertilizer on hardscape, you're going to drink that. Every one of us lives on waterfront property, is what he said. So anything that doesn't go where you want it is going someplace you don't. So to start, these are all the things, don't have to write this down. However, there is a cool word that when you're people like me, I'll get to that, yeah. These are the basics that we get from the air. And of course, some of this will come from, in other forms, from the soil. But if you can remember, C. Hopkins Cafe, mighty good. I learned that from our colleague at work. Just leave out the I, because iodine is not one of them. So it's carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, sulfur, calcium, iron, and magnesium. So if you can just remember, and anybody can, because I don't remember anything at my age, and I can remember this. C. Hopkins Cafe, right there. Okay, that'll get you through all the toughest questions that Laura and company can think of. This is what we should know, however. There's a fertilizer standard. There's the best management practices. If we want to, and let's assume you're in this, I mean, there's better ways to make a lot of money, and being an arborist is okay, but it's not the best. You do it because you like it, and hopefully you like trees and want to do the right thing. So there's a standard. What it says is the only reason to fertilize is to supply nutrients if there's a deficiency. How do we know? It's like, remember the old joke about a thermos? Keeps hot things hot, cold things go cold. How do we know? Never mind, it's early in the morning. So we're supposed to have objectives. Do we want it to grow fast? I mean, all those years, I fertilized trees because they were good for my income. We fertilized big trees all the time. Did I ever see them make a change? Not really. I don't think I ever saw it. I didn't pay attention at the time because it was a good thing to have those high returns. We can do better, and you can make more money at it. So, do you want to overcome a deficiency? Do you want to promote growth? Well, I'll hit a couple of those things. The best management practices also say, if you don't apply it right, I take that back. If it's not needed, it can may not benefit, it could end up in water, or it could create susceptibility to certain insects. You've heard this if you've been in the business or have talked to other people about it, that if you fertilize a hemlock before you've got the diligence suppressed, it's going to be chow time. They love it. And so do most sucking insects. You fill a plant with nitrogen, you don't make them very happy. So, and fat and highly reproductive. So the trouble is believe this or not, with all the science that is accumulated, arboriculture is only 100 10, 20 years old. Really, Bartlett and Davy in the early 1900s are the only really scientific tree companies. The rest was forestry research. So nobody really knows a hell of a lot about fertilizer. Because there's so much else to study. It's such a young science. The tree fund, in case you've ever heard of it because you're in the ISA, was originally formed in 1976, but it wasn't called the tree fund. The tree fund's 2002. We have 15 years of funded research in our industry from ourselves. It's incredible how little we know and how much there is to do. So that's why it's fun when we work for a laboratory, because we hear stuff. So there's not much that's been studied out there. But this is what we should know. This is an old professor of mine had this in his textbook, and I went back many years later and said, wait a minute. And what he said was, here's where the deficiencies are, and here's where you put in so much that you cause decline. So the point of it is the tree is going to look great. If this is the nutrient level, it's going to look great. Why add more if the tree doesn't need it? And here is something else. I don't think I have this in here, but this is kind of important to know. That there are those, and the reason that we do research on this stuff, who say if you over-fertilize a tree, this is a good exam question. If you over-fertilize a tree, if you pour that nitrogen on, does the tree have to take it up? Or will the tree say, I don't need it. What are you doing? And so the word for taking it up is obligated, and the other one is facultative, which means that I used to be on an academic and then I didn't get tenure. No, never mind. But the other one is facultative. What do you think? Nobody knows, neither do I. It's up in the air. However, the data, all the science says, it sounds like they'll have to take it up and grow to death, but the science says, no, they don't. People can take you to an all-you-can-eat buffet when you haven't eaten all day. You're still going to have enough and stop at some point. There's just nobody that can, you can be training for a sumo tournament and they can keep pushing rights in front of you. There's going to be a point where you're not going to want anymore. So trees aren't stupid. They've been around for a long time dealing with this for a geologic time. And so you cannot make a tree take up if it's fully sated. It just won't. So that uptake is facultative. So then what? Do we know how much of the fertilizer we apply actually gets up into the tree? No, because it varies by soil, it varies by species, it varies by age, it varies by evapotranspiration, how much a tree can pull up. It varies by root health. If you have unhealthy roots, you think they can take up nutrients? Not very well. So the idea that you're going to overcome trees' problems by, we'll feed it. Ain't gonna work. So this chart is just to say enough is enough and more is not necessarily better. You've probably heard that before. Except in notable cases like beer and liquor, you don't have to overdo it. So whose idea was it to fertilize trees? It came from agriculture. So the idea is people realized, in the 1840s, people started identifying nutrients. There was a German chemist named Justus von Liebig, my man, except that he almost caused me to flunk out of college because he basically invented organic chemistry. But what they started to say was, nutrients in plants, we can isolate these molecules, these elements, and say they have a big effect. So they realized that in agriculture, you're taking plants out and eating them, and all that ATP you might have heard of in high school biology goes through your system, and the phosphorus goes out the other end. It doesn't go back to the plant, so we have to replace it. So we put the phosphorus back in the ground, one way or another. So we fertilize them. But trees stay put, so we don't need to fertilize them the way we do agriculture. But then it came along that, we rake up leaves. And in the forest, trees typically are closed systems, meaning that when the leaves fall, they fall on the ground. Rain hits them, they form a weak carbonic acid, and the nutrients cycle right around. So deciduous trees in an undisturbed woods are basically a pretty closed system. Well, we break that, right? We break up the leaves, and we put in turf. What are we thinking? So we do this. And so the science says that we can export, we can remove between 1 and 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet of elemental nitrogen from trees just by raking them up. So that's why we do it. That's what we've been telling clients for decades. You rake up your leaves, you put in turf, we gotta fertilize. So then we use something like this. So you should know what analysis is if you know that those 3 letters, NPK, stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. That's important. That middle number, I will mention, that's important to know now that there's a 0 there, and I'll show you that. But this is what's out there. And you'll hear all kinds of things. I used to be occasionally on a radio show in New York called the Garden Hotline with a guy named Ralph Swanson. And we'd talk about all these things about, you don't need phosphorus, and this is what the science said. Nobody was listening. Cut to a commercial, and he would say, feed your trees with the phosphorus for flowering. No, you moron, that's not how it works at all. But he said, we gotta sell the soap. So there's all kinds of stuff out there with different analyses. But guess what? It's like, it's like my doctor said to me, you still taking supplements in the morning? You still taking a multivitamin? Yeah. He says, well, do you eat right? Yeah. Then why are you doing that? Feels good, I think. So I stopped because I'm dumb, but I ain't stupid. So this is why. Do you need all of this? Is 25 what you need? Is 1010? Is 27.99? What do you need? Well, here's the story. The word is out there, as I mentioned, that there's eutrophication. That means all that green scum on your ponds. If you have a pond or a stream and it's got extra vegetation and it's somebody's excess nitrogen and more likely phosphorus is finding its way into your water bodies. And that ain't good, because you get this eutrophication. And then what happens is they start to talk about bans on lawn fertilizers, because as I said, it's not getting all into the lawn. Nobody knows that you can over-fertilize it, and then what happens? They won't take it, it'll run off. Even turf, which can use it by the ton. And then you get this eutrophication, and then they'll start worrying about getting rid of nitrogen and phosphorus. Yeah, and so this is how the government, as we say in New Jersey, looks at it. They're thinking that, now I like this because this guy makes the same fashion statement I would. But what they're saying is you put that drop spreader out and it's going in the water. And in fact, if you could read this eye chart, I couldn't blow it up very well. Fertilizer made of nutrients, and when you put it on the ground, they go right into the stormwater. It says nothing about what it does for plants. Be aware that this sentiment is out there, and the idea of fertilizer as a pesticide is out there too. So in the future, the reason I'm preaching like this, instead of just going over the real basics, is because ultimately the reason I'm still doing this job is because I believe in doing it well and right and scientifically. So if I can convince you, do my best Joel Osteen up here, tell you that your prosperity depends on doing your fertilizing right, well, good. So what it says here, it'll create algal blooms. So, the same idea, they lump it in with this. This is also a car my mother actually owned. This is one where I hid under the dashboard when she drove me to school because I didn't want my friends to know I was in such a dorky car. And then this goes on, this is the same thing. Nice fashion statement, but what they're saying is, see how these were in the New York subway system, up in the subway cars and around the stations, among the places I saw them. So the point of it is, you can see how we're lumped in. So what they said was, because of all this eutrophication, and it came from Westchester, the Croton watersheds up in Westchester is a primary place that New York City got its water. But then Westchester became the suburb it is, and everybody has a perfect lawn in Westchester, so they can no longer use water, or they couldn't for years. In the summertime, had to get it from the Delaware system, because it was had so much eutrophication from the cosmetic use, if you will, of fertilizer. So they said they banned it, and so we were, I think, the first to take phosphorus out for that reason. But that's just one step. So and I'll show you why. So if you see fertilizers there that have phosphorus, you probably don't need it, and the phosphorus that you're applying is probably going to end up in the Raritan, or where I live, the South Branch of the Raritan, or things like that. But The next step is soil sampling. This is gonna come for you. Someday it'll be law, but it's not, because it's too hard for everybody to do. But we process, our lab probably processes 12,000 now a year soil samples. We have probably the largest soils database because we're not supposed to, there's some people that can, we're not supposed to fertilize without a soil test. So, you know, this is the future. Don't guess soil test. If you go to a dock, and for the first time, you're going to do two things, and it's really, look at the arboricultural analogy. You're going to take that form and fill out your history. When you go on a property, your brain starts to do that anyway. When was this built? How old are these buildings? When were these trees planted? What was here before? What kind of disturbance has there been? You're taking that patient history the way a doctor would. And if you're good and you have the right kind of client, you can sort of interrogate them, pound their head on the ground until they listen to you, until you get it out of them. Used enhanced interrogation techniques, send them to Abu Ghraib for our burst. So, but you get the information from them, and then what do? You take a soil test, and it's ever so much like our version of a blood test. You don't go for that first visit from the doctor without them taking a blood test. They want to know what's going on with you. What's up? And so we had to do the same thing. Take a soil sample, find out what's up, where your plants are growing, what's going on down there. And just to tell you, tip you off, this is year-old data. So this is from last year. These are where Bartlett's offices are. Just so, again, it's advertising by association, but it's not meant to be. Just to show you what's out there. So these are where offices are, where I'm getting these samples from. And just to give you a sense of it, this is how much nitrogen is in 7,500 samples from last year. It's very hard to measure nitrogen directly. That's not really important. So what we use is what's called estimated nitrogen release. It's what comes out of the organic matter. We burn it. Look at the nitrogen. Most of your soils have a fair amount of it. So do you need to fertilize automatically? Depends on your goals. You trying to make a young tree grow fast, or you're trying to keep a whole tree alive, you might change the amount of nitrogen by a lot. Oh, you think you got phosphorus problems? You think you should use phosphorus? No. Every soil sample I have ever seen, every time I do this in a talk, coast to coast, from Maine to Florida, there's very few places where phosphorus doesn't look like that. You don't need it. There's a giant pool of phosphorus in the soil. The trick is availability, and I'll mention that. Plus, I'll mention this quickly. There was, for those of you who pay attention to current events, an event, probably 15, 20 years ago called peak oil, but we thought we'd run out before fracking and all that. And so there was said that here's all we can find and here's the rate of use. Oh my God, we're going to run out. Well, we're doing the same thing with phosphorus. If you look here, there's when the Industrial Revolution and the fixing of nitrogen by a process called the Bosch-Haber process, which was fixing nitrogen out of the air. It was the first time that was done. Otherwise, people had to throw manure back, but now we can get it out of the air and make ammonium nitrate. So people have grown, so is phosphorus. So that's peak, but where does phosphorus come from? Rock. You know, we could recycle it. I read a book about the Korean War that said that when the Americans landed on an amphibious landing, they could hardly stand the smell because there was no sewage plants. There was none in China 3,000 years ago. People went around in these towns and who had the job, great job, of picking up the night soil and spreading it on the agricultural fields. Closed system. They recycled, but it didn't smell good because it was humans. And so what happens is we're going to start to run out because of the rock. And it was in Scientific American, phosphorus famine and all of this. This is what the data show. This is how much it's being used. This is when they figure the rock will run out. And the point of it is, who's got it all? Our pals, the Chinese, and Morocco and the Sahara, South Africa, and we have some. But all those fun places that we get along with and are getting along better with every day. So a lot of it's coming from rock. And so if you look at it, as the world has grown, look at how much is being used. This is why people are getting upset. You know, manure, guano, there was almost a war that we had with Britain over the Guano Islands off of Chile. in which the British reduced 150 feet thick of guano over that had developed over all of time when Darwin was out there and everything, saw all that. And those islands were reduced to bare rock within about 40 years. A whole mess of them. We still own 6 guano islands that we settled in a treaty. See, you never know what you're going to learn if you hang around with a person who's old enough to have read a lot of esoteric, arcane stuff. So, anyway, that's a phosphate mine in Morocco. They're serious. So, that's where it comes from. So, just that's another reason not to use phosphate. But anyway, potassium. What are we learning about this? Potassium is critical. There's a new stuff that's sweeping arboriculture. We certainly use a lot of it. Potassium phosphate. It's not about the phosphate, it's about the potassium, because potassium is critical in regulating guard cells. The stomata, which you'll learn in anatomy, opening and closing them in drought becomes very critical. We are now looking at potassium as not something that we're just correcting deficiency. We want potassium to be high because we want that tree to have its ability to defend itself. So potassium's another one. So is calcium. Calcium is critical in building cell walls. And as an amendment, we're just plain adding it to keep it in a high range because we're learning of its value in stress. So if you've heard of things like, I can't even think of the name, phosphate 30, potassium phosphate, there's not a lot of data, but there's a lot of people studying it. We certainly are. This might not even be in your NPK fertilizer. And look, you can't really afford not to have manganese in your plant. It's another key micronutrient. And that guy I talked about, Justus von Liebig, my man, also came up with this idea that if you have a short stick on your barrel, short stave, that all the other stuff that you add is not going to make much difference if you have a serious deficiency of one. If you ever heard the story of the British Navy and scurvy, it was just vitamin C, no matter what else they ate. If you have a deficiency, you're going to be sick. So that's what it is about plants. The other thing is I'll mention this, but quickly, cation exchange capacity just is pretty good, which means there's a lot of clay soil in New Jersey, and I'll show you what. It's just the size of the bucket that all the nutrients go in. It just means how much can they hold. And what this says is it either tells you about organic matter or it tells you about clay. So since you don't have much organic matter, and I'll show you that in a minute, it means that you have a lot of clay soils in New Jersey, which tells you a lot. This is very important. pH. Most of them are okay. Half of them are okay. But we have about a third of soils that are way too high in pH. What does that matter to you? It matters because of this. That most plants, and this is useful information to remember, most plants are happiest between 5.5 and 6.5 pH. 7 is neutral, is buffered. pH is the alkalinity or acidity of a soil. Like vinegar has a pH of about 2, bleach has a pH of about 10. So what you look at is these bars, the thickness is the availability of those nutrients. So when you go up here, see how iron disappears? If you go out into soils that we call calcareous limestone soils, like out by central Pennsylvania, a lot of pin oaks. If you plant a pin oak there, it's yellow. It's because that's a sensitive plant. Iron disappears at high pH. And so a lot of nutrients do have those effects, but iron's the most distinctive. But if you have low pH, if you have an acid, now if you also go to a soil where there's a lot of, I showed you that picture of all those rocks around the base of a tree, as they leach, that masonry is very alkaline. If you have what we call sidewalk coffins, tree pits on the street, all of that leachate, the 9/11 memorial that Bartlett takes care of, is another concern of ours, because they keep power washing off the plaza, and all that runs into the soil, and that's very alkaline. So balancing the pH becomes critical, but as you get low, phosphorus disappears, potassium disappears, so too acid. So what's the issue? The issue is you start to worry about correcting pH and let nature take care of itself. If you are ahead of me on this story and you're interested in what I'm saying, you might be saying, wait a minute, organic matter is good, and then if I could bring pH down, I'll be all right. Well, a couple of side notes. People ask me a question all the time. and I've sort of laid this out, but I don't expect you to be ahead of me quite yet. Should we fertilize when you plant? Well, maybe. The issue is because the best management practices standards say, are you trying to correct the deficiency or are you trying to promote growth? And so we're trying to promote growth in a young tree, but take a soil sample. There is no answer. Most of the time you can find out that you can't burn a plant unless you're using hollytone or something which has a very high salt index. No, it's all about what you're trying to accomplish and what fertilizer you use. So here's some important data though that's just, I told you we don't have a lot of science on this, but older trees, just like older people, you take me to a buffet, I'm out of there at the salad bar, I should be. We just did this, we had a volunteer session last Saturday, giving away trees in our township. And so to be nice, I bought 2 pizzas for the grown-ups. One kid, 12 years old, ate 5 slices, the rest of us had 1. All I need to know, and he would have kept going if there were more. And he's thin, you know, the adults have 1.5 and we're all looking like we're going into a Masters sumo tournament. So mature trees mostly resorb their nutrients, and because this is their survival adaptation. They hold their nutrients, they don't shed many. Young trees, on the other hand, if you ever heard of Alex Shigo and you've heard of Apoplast and Simplex, they're all alive. They're growing like weeds, like a teenager. You can pump nitrogen to a new tree. It'll get greener, it'll grow faster. Do it to an old tree, nothing happens. The reason is they're not adapted to grow faster. So in an old tree, the goal would be replace depleted nutrients based on the soil test. So this is the future because we're not going to want to put those nutrients in the water. We still don't know what goes into a tree. So we're going to run around, take soil samples, and we know, for example, where I work, that we know that certain species like a different complement than others. So we'll look and say, oh, white pine likes this, and a white oak likes that. It'll be different. So that's what's coming for you by the time you're my age. We still don't know how much trees take up, but young trees, you can certainly pump them silly, and they'll probably take it up. So this is, well, we'll probably be fertilizing young trees and just mulching old ones in the future. But this is the last thing that I wanted to add on that part, is about organic matter. Look at that. It's not what it should be. It's relatively low in New Jersey, across 7,500 samples. And so these are people you might know. This is Kent seeded trees in Lawson D. Woods, but never mind, if you never met them, I would understand. I can wait. But here, you know, typical what we see is too acidic. Phosphorus is always very high, but what I wanted to draw your attention to is one of the things we have on all our samples. This is an old one. Is the organic matter is very low. So when you get a soil sample like this, what do? What do you say to people? What's our prescription? Well, I told you already, I tipped this off.
More mulch.
Whatever the question, the answer is going to be mulch. If your client wants organic, could you do any better than mulching? And if you go to a website called the Garden Professor's Blog, there's a friend of mine named Linda Chalker Scott who runs it. She's brilliant. That's why I sought her out to be a friend of mine. She has these things called horticultural myths, which she talks about a variety of things. And what she has basically said is, what's the best mulch? Wood chips out of the back of your truck. So it's the best thing you can do for people is leave the chips behind. In fact, there's a brilliant guy, another brilliant one. He's so brilliant, I look at the data he puts up to that. And what he says in the end, though, is this. What's the best amendment for soils? And he tried compost, he tried fertilizer, he tried organic fertilizer, he tried all this stuff. 50% compost, which means broken down mulch, and 50% mulch. That's the answer. That is the 50-50. That's the optimum treatment. So, am I a particularly organic guy? No, I pissed off one of the guys in the produce department at Wegmans. I said, I don't want all this organic stuff. Where's the pesticide-treated stuff? Just because I'm that kind of person, trained. And he said, we don't get that question very often. But, so, having said that, this is still the best thing you can do. So, what does it do for you? Let's see, I'm going to see how fast I can go here. It eliminates competition with turf, which is the best thing in the world. If you have nothing else to do, for compaction. You don't have an air spade. You're not gonna till in compost. Put down mulch. It'll do the job for you. It'll just take time. When we have these extremes, and if you're a believer in climate change, and if you're not, well, I have a president for you to vote for. And I say things like this because I'm old now, don't care. So it keeps the soil moisture in when we have droughts. And we've had bad droughts last 2 summers. And we've had some dry winters. And then we have these huge storms that overcome the drought. So we conserve soil moisture. It keeps the soil temperatures down when we have hot, dry weather. It does everything. And when it's there and it breaks down, it releases nutrients from the organisms and all of that. It does great things. So, and it protects stems and roots. So this is a fancy way of saying all that. Add organic matter, you get good biological activity, you get better soil aggregation, all the things I was talking about. You get better decomposition, all these things, you get detoxification, all these things that are all positive. It's the best thing we can do. This is important to tell people. However you decide how to tell people about it, go out, not up. It's a soil treatment, not a stem treatment. Keep it away from the stem. And then we get this other question. You'll get it. What's the best mulch? Well, the idea that stuff breaks down is a good idea. We want it to break down. Why not put down when it grew? You know, same thing. How about this cedar bark mulch? Well, it breaks down. There's more lignin, less cellulose, so it'll take longer. How about bark nuggets? Yeah, well, you don't put on very much, but there's a reason. It takes long to break down. A lot of lignin, doesn't break down easily. So why not just take shredded hardwood mulch if you got hardwoods, pine, straw, pine needles if you got pines. So beautiful. That's what we like. Don't do this at home. Right? Don't let turf go up to the base of trees. And the best data on that comes from a guy named Gary Watson at the Morton Arboretum. Did a study a long time ago. His sugar maples out in a beautiful lawn were declining. And so he said, being a good scientist, sorry, text message from my daughter. I forgot to shut it off. So he took the turf away. This is a profile of the roots under turf. This is a profile after 3 years under mulch. He got 5 times the root growth. That's probably the oldest slide everybody I know ever has used it because it was such elementary pioneering research. So yeah, keep the turf away from the trees. Don't allow it to grow to the base. Excess wheat, I haven't got the time to go over this, but you know all this. That it holds moisture against the stem. You'll get adventitious roots that won't, and the regular roots will be suffocated because it is suffocating. You'll get these sorts of problems. You'll get these bird's nest sorts of problems with excess mulch. The idea here, obviously, is to make it a perfect hourglass. Is to mulch it up to the first limb. These are really old pictures, but I haven't gotten better. It might be organic. Sorry. This came from New Jersey, which I like. Mulch volcanoes, kill trees. This is my neighbor. Thank you very much for the picture. Then I get to go out on certain sites and I say, well, now this is arboriculture at its finest, like this. Take your barbecue rock, top the trees, put in a perfect lawn. On the other hand, we once had an arborist who worked for utilities. She sent me these. You can't make this stuff up. For those of you who send out crews or anything like that, is what did you say in the morning to the crew? Hey, I got this load orange mulch on the back of the truck. I don't want you to come back with nothing. Make the date come out, put it down. Don't bring it back. And so if it goes up and down, I want you to mulch. So the only thing here that isn't mulched is the tree. So, and this is also New Jersey. So, we do have our own way of doing things, and I appreciate the interest in mulching. This one is, I had to put this in, even though I'm running out of time. But I am pretty close to wrapping it up. So, somebody actually built one, which I appreciate. And that took, somebody probably got a prize in the science fair. But don't do it to shrub beds either. Just because we're talking about trees, shrub beds are, and you'll see trees that are mulched properly in the shrub beds that are over mulched. Then you'll typically get things like, you ever hear of Spirobulus artillery fungus? If you leave the mulch and keep adding on, it becomes hydrophobic. And these little things that look like Reese's peanut butter cups, except really small, called artillery fungus, and they'll fly a long way. And the adhesive is incredible. The Forest Service was studying it. It was so effective. And it'll hit a white surface and you'll never get it off. So don't do that. Don't do this. I don't understand why you mulch the sign and not the tree. But anyway, I don't know what you were thinking. And okay, so this won't work because none of them have, even though they ran last night. But yeah, I already showed this. That's a great way to incorporate organic matter. Rubber mulch, don't do this. Don't do this. It lasts forever. It's often made from tires, which has a very high, almost toxic zinc content because of the radial bands in them. Zinc apparently is at very high levels. Rubber mulch is a bad thing. It also offends your finer sensibilities. Biostimulants, compost tea, Bioplex, Super Thrive. We have studied them all. And I say that because we're like you folks, we're a business. And if we can sell you something, but it has to hold up scientifically and ethically. And this doesn't. We have tested everything. It's mulch and water. You put down mulch and you water it, let nature do it. All these things. If you can mark it up and sell it to the client, fine, doesn't hurt. Ain't doing you no good neither. Ain't helping. So it's mostly mulch with water, and that's what the science is. Last couple of slides. I didn't arrange the wording very well, but the point of it is, look at this. This is a demonstration plot. The most important thing is keep the base of your trees clear. Roundup's your friend. Just don't spray it on the foliage. But where weeds can get up to the base of the tree, even young, they'll outcompete it. So clear the base of the tree, you get a nice difference. Add mulch, you get a better difference, and I'll show you a little better. So this is just, you can see, this is just with the turf competition eliminated. This is not that nice turf either, but the soils weren't that good. But, and this is an old study, but you can see mulch makes it look better. Then when you add in mulch and fertilizer on another place, you see it's even better. So, mulch, adding fertilizer to mulch just accelerates the microbial degradation of the mulch. So there you go. Look at that, because he hit it close on top. So I'm going to switch. And if you have questions, don't ask me, because the answer is mulch. And now I'll switch over so I can get to Laura. Is it all right? So I just keep on going? And